Hello explorers and welcome to another video. Today we are going to do a comparison between different JDK versions. And that is not something that I will say you need to do on a regular basis, but if you want to decide how you should run your application in the most proficient way in a production environment, you should do these kind of tests. I first got this idea from an interview with the libertica guys, and they had created a VM where you could run their own Java version in a very efficient way and then run it very fast, of course. So it was a good thing for production environments. I also looked into this a bit more and found this document from the mid-Sweden university from two guys called Fredrik Fong and Mustafa Reed. And they had done a performance comparison between Graal, Oracle JDK, OpenJDK for optimization for a test suite. And when I looked at this paper that I wrote, it will be in the link in the description, the only thing they found there was that GraalVM was a little bit better on Windows, but very similar on Linux, and not really, it wasn't that large of a difference between them running large test suites. But they still did some conclusions in their paper. But it was still interesting. And I wanted to do the similar comparison. I didn't have that test base. I tried to run there on Java 17, but most of the test cases just failed. So I stopped running that after a while. And I just ran some application that I have my own. Some that is proprietary that I actually run in production or at work. And other things that are open source. So I just tried some small applications. So let's switch over to my screen here. And here we have this little slideshow that I prepared. So JDK compare. We will look at speed between different VMs and locally. And the first graph I have here is for the open source program. This is a library that takes a specific format for Braille and then creates a Braille file that could be sent to a printer and actually run through the printer and create Braille text. So it's open source, is very niche, but still something that I could reproduce and run here. And in this graph, we see that running this bunch of times actually have a little bit of a difference in speed. If we look at the actual script here, we see that we run this tool 6 times. It takes about 20 seconds to run, and I have run it in this Docker image here where I have OpenJDK 7.0.2 Slim Bullseye. We have this Eclipse Turin 17.05, and then we have these Bellsoft, libertica, a runtime container. We all have glibc and Muscle that we try, and we also have this Spring CI GraalVM 17.012. So those are the things that we are running here. And we can see that locally we run this at 20 seconds, and that is a local copy of the JDK sent in with my Ubuntu system. Then OpenJDK takes 22 seconds. Apache, this Turin Eclipse version, takes about 22 seconds as well. Libertica takes 24 seconds in the VM, and GraalVM is as fast as running things locally. It takes only 20 seconds there as well, which was very interesting because you have the overhead of the Docker image, and it doesn't really matter when it comes to GraalVM, so that is really well optimized. And what I'm testing here is not really the speed of the application, it's the startup speed. Because I'm running it 6 times, I can actually see if there is a difference in how fast it actually starts up and run it. It takes about 5 seconds to run this test. So we can see here that the startup time for an application is a little bit slower with libertica, but not really that large. If we go to the next graph here, we have a comparison between running things locally and in different VMs, but here I also have added the running the actual proprietary application that I am creating at work. It's something that takes large PDFs and creates smaller ones. So it's an optimization process that I run. I run it on the worst case scenario, so it's a file that is really large and needs to be really small, so it takes a long time, about 15 minutes to run. You see that the graph actually starts at 1520, so it's not at 0. So this is just to see the difference between the different systems, and we see that the difference between them is less than a minute, so it's not that huge of a difference. If we look at the local run here, it takes a little bit over 15 minutes. And actually in the VM, Graal is not far from it with 1555, something like that. And then we have the OpenJDK, which runs pretty fast. It does this around 1620, 1630, running it in local and in the VM. We see that it actually runs a bit faster in the VM. So the VMs are actually performant in the way that they are made and tailored to run this executable in them. The same goes for this Apache Eclipse version here, OpenJDK. It also runs much faster in a VM. It's actually down to 13 seconds. So not that slower than the actual local copy here. When it comes to Libertica, it actually performed the worst of them all. Sadly, it runs in 1647 and it only runs locally. And the reason for that is that their image was very tailored for running Java applications with Spring Boot and so on, and not really made for this specific application. And what I have done in this application is that I have added libraries that are compiled on the system, which requires a glibc library that is not available in this Libertica VM. So I could not run it in the VM at all, and it's a bit slower to run locally. So take that for what you will. It probably can run Spring applications pretty fast, but if you are running this in production, you should test it as well. And the last graph I have here is how large these VMs are, which also could come into your decision. And we see here that Libertica actually have created a very small image here with, I think the numbers was 225 megabytes for the glibc one and 138 for the muzzle one. So the glibc one is actually smaller than the muzzle. And then the GraalVM is the largest at 1 gigabyte in size. And then we have OpenJDK and Apache, which is reasonable at 408 and 266 for Apache. So the images are not that huge, except for the GraalVM then. So if you are running this, it's multiple Docker images in a cloud, and the setup speed and copying the image to a specific worker and so on is something that you really need to have fast, then Libertica is a really good option for that. If you have long-running processes that you seldomly spin up more or less of, then GraalVM is a really good one to run your executables on. So this was what I wanted to compare today. I hope that you found this interesting. I hope that you learned something today. If you are running these things in production, please run your own test and try with the application you actually want to run, so you see your numbers for this. I ran these kind of applications just so I have a hum on what I should deploy in our production environments. If you like this video, give it a like, share it with your friends and colleagues. If you have any comments or suggestions, leave them down in the comment section down below. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. And I really hope to see you in the next video.